This week, we're painting an abstract, messy watercolor logo in Procreate. Plus, we'll discuss ways to reuse that artwork and monetize it. I've listed my specs on screen and you can grab the free color swatches in the video description. Let's get into it. I've got my brand new canvas, and the first thing we're going to do is stamp in our big splatter mark, and then we're going to recolor it. I'll be using my messy watercolor brush set for this entire tutorial, so I'll leave a link on screen and in the video description. The messy watercolor brush set includes several categories of brushes, so you can find whatever you need really easily. The Messy Extras has all of these painting brushes that I also use, some of them for smudge brushes as well, and you've got some paper textures down here as pattern brushes, and then all of your stamps are categorized by type, so super easy to find whatever you need. And because we need a splash to begin with, I'm going to head into the Messy Splashes, and it's going to be splash number 3, and I'm going to grab my lightest blue color, the very first one, and you can just tap it in with your finger to guarantee full opacity. And because the intention of this artwork would be for a logo or for a large watercolor graphic, we want to make sure we're making this as large as we would need it. That's why we're on a bit of a larger canvas this week, which you could make even larger if you wanted. So this is not sufficient. We need to try and get it as large as possible while still having a little bit of room to adjust the splatter that we're going to include around it. So I'm going to undo that and increase my brush size a bit. This we may need to play around with a little bit to find the perfect size. I'm going to try 50% and see what that looks like. And that actually feels really nice. I'm going to keep that one right there. Next, we're going to recolor this because it's looking pretty plain by just being one color. And the way that I do this is I create a brand new layer. I'm going to switch to a painting brush. So come into the Messy Extras. And my favorite painting brush is the Tuesday water brush. So I'm going to select that. I'm increasing my brush size all the way to max. And I'm going to grab my orangish yellow color first, and I'm going to paint where this splatter is. I'm just going to paint right over it, and I'm using one stroke to do this because if I go back in, it'll make it even more dense, so you'll lose some of the texture in it if you decide to go back in. Just something to keep in mind. Totally fine if you want to do that. And then I'm also going to put some yellow over here as well. When I chose this color palette, I typically use an analogous color palette, which just means on the color wheel, these are colors that are next to each other. So I've got like an orangish, yellowish color, and then I've got green and blues. So all of these colors, when they're mixed together, you're always going to get a really pretty color. You're not going to get something muddy like a maroon or a brown. So that's what I always keep in mind when I'm recolorizing these watercolor marks. Next, I'm going to grab the blue. I'm still on the same layer, this recoloring layer, I guess you could call it, and I'll put a little bit of blue right between them. You probably notice I'm extending beyond the bounds of the splash mark. That way I've just got a little bit of extra color to play with if I need it. And then I'm going to bleed this blue a little further down here. And then I can even smudge these together a little bit to make them feel like they belong together more than they do right now. So I'm going to use the smudge brush for that. And then my two favorites are the Bloom and Bleed and also the Puffy Wash when I have a lot of area that I want to look more natural. So I'm going to grab the Puffy Wash first, and I'm using this as a smudge brush. And I've kind of got like a medium size to this, 15%. And I'm just going to push some of this. I'm coming back and forth between these two colors. And I can even extend this out a little bit, and then I'll switch to my Bloom and Bleed. And this one I can get a little bit more precise with. So I'm getting rid of the hard edges. So I'll use the Bloom and Bleed over here. I want to make sure all of those marks are covered. That looks good. So now I'm going to apply a clipping mask to this. So on this layer, tap on the layer thumbnail and choose clipping mask, and you can see how it's masked in there, but it's very light right now. I want it to be stronger, so I'm going to duplicate this layer, and then I'm going to change the blend mode of this. So tap on the little N and toggle this up to color burn, and you can see right away how much more vibrant this becomes. Now we've got our orangish yellow and we've got our blue. I'm going to add in a little bit of green over here. So I'm going to create a brand new layer and head back into the stamp brushes, and this time I'm going to grab a messy bloom, and I've got bloom 19 right here. Change your color to the green, tap that in, that's nice and big. So I'm gonna scale it down a little bit, and I want it to sit right along this curve. I'm just gonna pop that in there right around there. So it's interacting with this orangish yellow as well as the blue. So that feels good. And I'm also going to change this one's blend mode to color burn. And you can see that's giving me a more vibrant appearance right here. It's almost fluorescent. I'm going to reduce the opacity a little bit because that fluorescence is a little too strong for me. So I'm just going to come down a little bit, like 70%, and that feels a little bit better. Okay, so everything is feeling really pretty on the inside so far. Because we've got all these different colors happening, I also want to create more of an imperfect edge. That way it seems like this edge got a little watery during the process, because I do want this to have a messy watercolor feel. So a really easy way to do that is return to your original splash, and I can grab my smudge brush with the bloom and bleed, and I can push out some of these edges to soften them up. I'm actually going to remove this one completely, and you'll see why in just a minute. And I'm going to also soften this edge just as a start. We'll soften some other edges in a little bit. This was another reason why we extended that blue and orange above the splash mark. Now that I've got that all set, I'm going to put in an imperfect edge. So I'm going to grab the blue, I'm going to create a brand new layer up at the very top and head into your messy washes. So the washes from wash 18 to wash 27 are all really good candidates for creating a watery looking edge. And they also merge really well with these splash marks too. So I'm looking for, let's try wash 24 and see how that looks. So you can kind of get an idea of what this is going to do. I like this top edge, I think, better than this one. So I'm going to flip it vertically and then flip it horizontally, and we'll rotate it a little bit over here. And you can see now I'm getting some blue into the yellow, which would normally happen with traditional watercolors. And I also I've got this little bump right here. I can fit that right on that edge that I just smudged. So that looks really nice. And I want it to be a little more pronounced, so I'm going to change the blend mode of this to multiply. And we will smudge some of the edges of this too. So I've got my smudge brush. So this edge right here, I don't want that to appear, so I'm just going to push it back. It's basically like erasing, but erasing can give you some hard edges sometimes. So this is just a really quick way to always guarantee a soft edge. I do like having this harder line in there. It just looks like I spent more time on it, and things are a little bit more layered. Might soften that a bit. You can even add an extra one for the orange, but I don't want to overdo it too much. So the next thing I'm going to do is soften this edge just a little bit. So I'm going to return back to my splash mark, grab my bloom and bleed, and just push this one out. That way I've got a little bit of asymmetry between this softness and this softness, so then it's not just soft right here and hard everywhere else. So we'll just push that out a little bit here. Before we put in our final splashes and splatters, as I'm looking at this, this green is kind of bothering me, so I think I'm gonna move it a little bit. Let's see, I think I'm gonna stamp it in again, so I'm just going to clear this, grab my green, and I'll just re-stamp in that bloom. I think I wanted it to be a little bigger than I ended up having it, and that's why I got that really fluorescent splotch there. I wanted it to extend a little further into here. So that's feeling a lot better now. I like that more. The last thing is to add in some splatter marks. So I'm going to have some splatter coming kind of off over here, and I want to make this the orange color. So I'm going to create a brand new layer and switch to my orange color. And let's go into our splatters. And I'm going to grab splatter 9, stamp it in with my finger, and toggle it into place. I'm just going to pop it right around here. So I'm going to drag this splatter mark underneath the green, and I'm going to change the blend mode of this one to color dodge. And you can see how that gets nice and light. I'm going to come back above the green, create a brand new layer. I still have my orange, and this time we're just going to add in a simple splatter. So I'm going to grab splatter 4, stamp that in. I want to blend this so it interacts with what's beneath it a little bit better than it does right now. So I'm going to change the blend mode to linear burn. And then I'm going to grab my smudge tool, the Bloom and Bleed, and I'm going to smudge some of these. So it looks like this was splattered on top of the watercolor while it was still a little bit wet. So these aren't going to all be perfect dots on top of here. Maybe these ones are that come off of it, but the ones on top of the paint, especially over here where it's all smudged out, this would be pretty wet over here. I could even smudge some of the splatter right underneath it. And you don't have to use all the dots. You can always erase some of the dots too if there's too many. Nothing says you got to keep them all. I think I'm gonna smudge some of this lighter one a little bit over here. That feels good. We've got our abstract messy watercolor doodle now, which I envisioned as being part of the logo. So now I want to give you some ideas of how you can use this. But first, in order to reuse it, we need to export it. So in order to export it, you want to turn off your background color. So just turn off the visibility of it. And I can see already that my green is hanging down here, and I don't like that, and I didn't see it before because of my blend mode. So I'm just going to drag this one underneath that splatter so it's clipping masked into the other color layers that I have. So that will lock it in there. If I turn my background color back on, everything still looks good even after doing that, so that's great. I'm going to turn off the background color now, and then you want to go to the wrench, share, and choose PNG. Now you're going to save this image, so just tap on Save Image and that will save it to your camera roll. So now when you're in a brand new Procreate canvas, I'm going to show you how to bring it in there and how to manipulate it. This is just a regular screen size canvas. I want to show you how this works. So I'm going to hit the wrench and add, insert a photo, and grab it straight from your camera roll. You can see it's brought in here, and I can crop it off an edge if I want to. I can rotate it. I can get all kinds of different looks by manipulating it and moving it around. So if I wanted a letterhead design, I could just have this top texture bleeding off. If this doodle is part of my logo, it will instantly be recognizable as being something associated with my brand. It's a pretty hard-working element in that respect. So as far as logos go, this could be a logo idea where you just have a type mark that's knocked out of the watercolor mark, and then you've got the name right beneath it. This idea would be using that same type mark and having the name typed horizontally right next to it, so it would be more of like a horizontal lockup. And then for this one, I masked the texture into the letter mark, but then I expanded the mask to also include the edge of the splatter. So that was kind of an interesting result that could work really well. Here's a business card design. Super simple, same idea. You can see how you can keep reusing the work that you just did, how hardworking it is for you across all types of branding. Here's an idea of how that letterhead could look. You don't even need the type mark in here. You could just have the texture and then all the company's information right at the bottom. So then this texture can instantly grab attention. If you're creating an invitation design or any types of stationery design, a popular layout would be having the graphic take up 2/3 of your layout, and then the text or information can be in the bottom third. And then finally, here's another stationery layout where you would have your main information in almost like a belly band look right in the center, and it's knocked out of the watercolor texture, but you can see that watercolor texture is still super strong, and the colors for the text I just pulled directly from the watercolor texture by hitting this side dot right here. You can color sample anything, and then you can set your text in the colors that are derived directly from your watercolor texture. If you'd like to learn more about painting messy watercolors in Procreate, head on over to messywatercolors.com for a deep dive in my full online course. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please hit the like button, subscribe, and I will see you next time.